Welcome back to the SteadyTrade Podcast, everyone. Back with Matt McCall and a very cool topic today. This one has been kind of on my mind for years. I actually remember probably about like 10 years ago, I got asked, I don't even remember who it was. It was like a web page, and they were like asking opinions, like for trends, etc. And, they sent me like 3 questions, and this was like 10 years ago, and I was trying to dig it up. But one of the ones that I saw as like a future trend was water and water scarcity, et cetera. I think a lot of the listeners know I'm in a rural area in Michigan, a lot of farmland, a lot of irrigation, and there's issues. Like there's a lot of times the issues is these farmers are running their irrigation, and like some people have problems with their wells and stuff like that. Like there's an issue there because a lot of these GMO crops, they basically gotta water these things, or they have problems, et cetera. So I kind of saw it from that perspective. And then, obviously other issues in the world. And then you fast forward to now, and we've got all of this data center stuff going on. And I'll make a point, we'll link it. Asianometry is a great YouTube channel. It's for nerds. It's all like old computer and stuff like this. But it was one, he did a great one on data center. I actually kind of watched it as prep for when we talked about data centers a few months ago. And his point was like a big issue that a lot of these companies are having is getting enough water to do the cooling, et cetera. And a lot of these data centers are in water scarce areas. So it creates this loop. So that's what Matt brought the topic today. And I really like it because, again, I was already kind of seeing this way before we got into all AI data centers, and now it's like magnified. So great job on the topic. So I did really want to kind of talk about this one because I think it's going to just continue to get worse and worse, unfortunately. So
it is a problem. My book, The Next Great Bull Market, which came out early 2009, so I wrote it in 2008. So that's 16 years ago. I had an entire chapter on water, calling it a great investment. Some of the investments in there, believe it or not, the best performers that I listed are water utilities that have gone up. A lot of them, I think, close to 10x since that time. But for the most part, I was wrong. I thought water would be a much bigger topic in the investment world. And it happens from time to time, like when there's a natural disaster or something going on, you start hearing about it a little bit more. We're hearing about it more, as you mentioned, with AI centers needed for cooling and that type of stuff and AI. So you're hearing that more, but it really hasn't been a huge topic of discussion, or it is, and then it goes away.
And that's a great point because, like I said, I wasn't like, the only reason I mentioned the story about that, given that perspective, at the end of the day, I was quote unquote wrong. Like it really hasn't played out like I thought it was. Like again, it's kind of funny, it was about 10 years ago. You mentioned about 15. I thought like they were asking for like the next year big idea. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the thing. And it never really played out like I thought it was going to. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there. I'm trying to think of, there's a very famous kind of gentleman who talks about, issues and what leads to World War III. But a lot of people that I respect have said that water could be the cause of World War III. I mean, hopefully we're not on the precipice of it now. We get by whatever's going on. But I do believe that there's areas of the world that are hotbeds already, especially that China, Pakistan, India area, where they're all pulling from the rivers there, and there's not enough water getting down to India at this point. So I hate to say it, I don't want to be dire, but I think there will be a situation in the future where water does become something that you fight over. I mean, you can see a lot of wars in the last couple of decades were based off energy, oil, right? So I think you're going to see some out there in that situation. And just to kind of break down water real quick, because I know people are thinking before you turn this off, there's water everywhere. Water covers 71% of the Earth's surface. If you pull out and look at the Earth from far away, it looks blue, right? The blue planet. The problem is only 3% of the Earth's water is fresh. 2.5% of the Earth's fresh water is unavailable. So now we're down to 0.5% of the water that's on Earth is available fresh water, which is needed for drinking, which is needed for agriculture. A lot of it's oceans. 97% of the world's water is found in oceans, but it's too salty for drinking, growing crops, etc.
And even most industrial back uses. To the cooling thing, they're working on it, but they can't use salt water currently. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is something where it's tough for people to grasp it because especially people in developed countries like the United States or Western Europe, where you just turn the tap water. I just paid for,
or you just turn the tap on and there's always water there. Yeah,
exactly. This kind of blew my mind, Tim. It's a small number, but it still blew my mind that 99.2% of the U.S. has access to safe drinking water. 99.2. So you say, okay, that's great. Where the hell is the 0.8%? Nearly 1%. So you're looking at what? A little over 3 million people don't have access to safe drinking water in the United States? That blows my freaking mind.
Hey, man, remember I'm in Michigan. Flint's not far away.
True, yeah. But that blew my mind that it's not 100%. I know nothing in life's 100%, but I really thought that we would have a better number here in such a developed country that we're sitting in. And then, people always asked him, well, what do you need water for? What outside of, agriculture and drinking? Well, a smartphone, my little iPhone, which is right here, my iPhone, how much water it takes to make that? 12,760 liters.
Yep.
Well, 12,760 of this right here for one iPhone. A pair of leather boots, twice as much as this. A T-shirt, 4,000 of these.
Each.
4,000 liters is a half of a fire truck.
Yeah. Yep.
Unbelievable.
So back to your point, it's like, oh, there's water everywhere. Think of how many smartphones there are, and they take 12,000 liters of water each, and every year, here we are a week away from the next iPhone and everybody's going to buy it.
Exactly. It's crazy. And, it's not going to slow down. That's the thing. The demand for water, the OECD, they project that, global water usage from 2000 to 2050. So we're about halfway through that, obviously, increased 55%, which is big because we already have a supply and demand issue sitting in front of us at this point. But the big demand for that is coming from manufacturing. In that 50-year span, manufacturing demand for water up 400%, electricity demand for water up 140%. And I got to tell you, I think that's way undershooting it because we really didn't know a couple of years ago how much water was going to be needed for AI and data centers and how quickly this was going to grow. And we're in the first inning of that. So I think we're going to see water demand just go through the freaking roof. And where the hell is it coming from?
And then
that's the big thing.
And listeners might realize this, but I just want to make the point. Like when you're using water in these scenarios, factories, electricity, et cetera, that water is no longer potable anymore. So like basically you've now either, got to dispose of it or you've now got to do something to that to make it usable for humans again. So it's like, that's where, back to your point, like people are like, oh, water scarcity, look at the blue earth. But like, if it's limited and then it's getting used up and then has to be reconditioned, or I'm sure there's a proper term, like that's lowering the supply as well as increasing the cost at the end of the day. It's like that, people think, oh, water's free, but it's like, if you have to, number one, buy it, which a lot of these, facilities are, they have to, actually there's a big solar panel plant going a couple, hours north of me. And their big thing is they can't buy enough water from the local utility. And they're jacking the rates all up. And now they're like, well, we're going to quit building this factory, et cetera, because they can't get the water. And the water they do get is, again, needs to be, reconditioned. I'm sure it's not the right term, but like, so it's just this, it's getting more expensive and less of it.
Exactly. And the problem, a lot of it lies in the infrastructure. And, the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, every couple of years put out their big report from everything from bridges to roads, airports, water, infrastructure, et cetera. Water tends to usually get between a C- and a D. I think the most recent was a C-, which was kind of like my grades in high school. So it could end out okay. I think it ended up okay. But in that report, this is the stat that blows my mind. It's a lot of great reports. You can just Google ASC and look for the report card. But there's a water main break in the United States every 2 minutes.
Really? And
estimated 6 billion gallons of treated water, not just water. It's just treated, ready to be drank. Treated water is lost every single day. To put that in the context, that's about 9,000 swimming pools worth of water that just through main breaks, every single day we're wasting. And that's again, these numbers, when you start thinking about it and you compare them to, the liters, how many bottles it takes for, jeans and these swimming pools that we're losing, there's a problem. And the thing is, our infrastructure, we've talked about this in the past, Tim, our infrastructure in this country has been shit for decades. And every politician comes in and says they're going to do something, and they don't. I don't know where the money's going because we're spending a ton of money. It's going somewhere, but it's not fixing it. And that's why our bridges and our roads and our water infrastructure are at levels right now that rival third world countries. And that's embarrassing.
Yeah. And it's again, it's like you think of all of these taxes and all of this money, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And then kind of going back to it, because I'm sure everybody knows the story. You have a Flint, Michigan, where they basically poison the entire city, but yet there's still always money to send overseas. There's, foreign aid and fight wars all over the world. But yet here you're a city in your country literally can't drink the water. And I don't even know if they still can. I think it's a little better, but I think probably everybody still drinks bottled water because they can't depend on what they're supposed to do. And like there is a need for government. Okay. I believe in socialism when it comes to the fire department. Okay. Like I like socialism when a fire truck show up at my house and it's on fire. Police department, water distribution. Okay. If you live in a city, what are you going to do? You drill your own well in your apartment building? Okay. It's like you need government to do these things. But the bummer is that that's not cool. It's not interesting. It's not whatever. Maybe the lobbyists don't pay enough. So because of that, we have hundreds and hundreds of year old infrastructure that we're depending on,
And the thing is, you and I, if we're running this business, which I will call the United States the largest business in the world, they're just waiting to put Band-Aids on. I lived in New York City for over a decade, and it was consistent. I could probably walk 7 blocks in any direction and see a water main break somewhere with them digging up a hole. And you look down there and you can see how old this shit is. Yep. Like these pipes, and they're held in by pieces of wood that have literally been there a century. Like those pipes weren't meant to be there for more than 50 or 60 years. They've been there 100 years.
Yep.
And they're wondering why it's not working.
And they're still just fixing at the end of the day.
They're fixing it. They're not putting in. Yeah. We have technology now that we can go in there, and yes, it costs money, but I never looked into. There's got to be a study of how much we spend on putting on Band-Aids versus replacing it. I think the replacement, it has to make more sense to replace it, like to put new ones in. But again, you got to ask a politician spending money on nonsense to divert that money into something that we actually need. And that's not easy to do.
So, yeah, I mean, and again, I think that when you look at just this explosion of and even if it's nuclear, like I'm pro-nuclear, but nuclear uses a boatload of water too. It's like, you think of all these, and that's why I liked the topic for the episode, because I just don't think a lot of people think about it, because it is just water, it's boring, whatever. But all these technologies, all this manufacture, like all this stuff you need to do is depend on this more and more scarce resource. And to me, that should, in theory, open up opportunity.
Yeah. Like I want to pivot to the AI demand, but right before we do that, keep in mind, water, we're not just talking because, we want faster ChatGPT searches. You need water to live. It's the one thing we need. We need it not only in our body, but we need it to grow crops and feed animals that we eat. Without that, we cannot live. We need water. And it's something that we're going to come to a boiling point, no pun intended, in 20, 30, 50, 100 years. I have no idea, where water is going to be a major freaking issue. And it's going to be a major, major issue, I think. And I hope I'm wrong. So the AI demand, we've talked about this a lot. We need cooling. It's the fastest growing expenditure for running data centers, which, is data centers needed for AI, ChatGPT, et cetera. And Google, Microsoft, and Meta, Facebook Meta, all obviously use a lot of this search and demand for ChatGPT, et cetera, demand for data centers. And I only have the numbers as of 2022, but Google consumed 20 billion liters of Scope 1 water in 2022 just to cool its data centers. That's it, 20 billion liters. That was 20% up over the year prior. Google and Microsoft numbers aren't as high, but they saw their water consumption for data centers that year increase by 20% and 34% year over year, respectively. So you're seeing big numbers from these large companies.
And think about it. That's 2022, which is kind of like really before, obviously AI was around, but the boom. So think about those stats, where they are today,
Well, I mean, think about where it's, like, right. What's kind of crazy is Microsoft and Google both did come out and say that they're going to be what they call water positive by 2030. I had to dive into a little bit more what that actually means because I feel like you're still going to be using more and more water. Does that mean, is that like a carbon offset? Like, I'm not quite sure how they're...
Well, and that was in that Asianometry video that, again, we'll link below. Like, he talked about it. Like the idea is they're working on things that could make that water come out potable, basically, where it's not wastewater anymore. So basically, and he gave some stats and stuff, but, basically their goal, and, it's a big goal right now, is like they would be, in essence, neutral at some point, where at least the water they bring in goes back out and it doesn't need to be, something done to it. Like, you could drink it coming out of the facility type idea. Yeah.
I mean, I think there will be some type of technology at some point, right, to be able to do that. I don't think it's here right now.
Agreed. Yep.
And I will say this, it's something that I'm always keeping my mind on as an investment opportunity, because the company or companies that come up with this will be huge. That's your next NVIDIA. That's your next $1 trillion company, if somebody can figure that out. Because, I mean, everybody's going to need it.
And going back to that, that report I talked about 10 years ago, like, part of my prediction was, and like, these were big, bold predictions, but like, I was like, there's gotta be at some point, and I was wrong, but like, there's gotta be some massive play in like desalination or something. Cause it's like, it just seems so simple. Like you said, I mean, there's this massive supply of water that's can't use it for anything. Maybe, jump in it, swim,
Yep. No, I mean, I that's something, again, like, when you bring this up to people, like, oh, just desalination plants. One thing, it's kind of like nuclear energy too. NIMBY, not in my backyard. Nobody wants this huge thing, taking up the coast or whatever it might be.
That's probably California's problem. Like,
I would assume the same thing. The land's worth so much that they don't want to come and do that. People don't want to look at it because they pay too much in taxes. They have to stare at that ugly thing. And for right now, they're fine paying $4, probably out there $6 for a bottle of water, right? But there are companies out there, and we'll get into companies in a second, but they do, some that have this seawater reverse osmosis. They have, there's actually a company I'll throw out there real quick. I wasn't going to talk about it, but you brought this up. Consolidated Water is the name of the company, and the symbol, I believe, is CWCO. And they have a technology, kind of reverse osmosis, desalination, considered a utility company. It's based out of the Caymans, because obviously down there you have islands, so you need to have desalination. So that's they have a big one down in the Bahamas and a couple other, I think they have 11 desalination plants in total. But down in that area, the Bahamas, Caymans area, stock has been, I think it's actually one I did talk about in my book years ago. I think that's why I remember it. But the stock is at the same level it was back in 2008, honestly. Dividend, you probably made some money, but it has gone up since 2022 from $9 up to 38. We're at 27. So you're up 3x still in the last 2.5 years. So maybe there's something coming back to this play here. But the problem with investing in water, I don't know if you've looked into it all, Tim, but there's just not a lot of great pure plays for the things we're talking about. It makes sense, but like, it's tough.
And kind of going back to what we have said, and then, what I say all the time, especially like with short-term trading, like, especially from like short-term perspective, like, it's just not scary enough. And, and we've talked about that, like these monkeypox plays. Okay. Like we've had a bunch of amazing day trades because it's like scary and all. And people are like, the problem with water. And that's why I go back to being wrong 10 years ago. I think, as we've said, people are like, whatever, I turn the spigot on and water comes out. It's not sexy at the end of the day. It's not an electric vehicle. It's not a robo-taxi. It's not AI. It's not some cure for some disease. So they just don't ultimately they don't attract the money because people are like, oh, that's too boring. Yeah.
But I hate to use the term at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, whichever day that is, these stocks are going to start to outperform at some point.
Yes.
I can't tell you it's going to start today. Maybe it's already started. Maybe it's going to be a year from now, but they will be eventually. I think what happens here is it ends up being one of those plays off AI data centers, right? Everybody knows AI data centers. And we know NVIDIA, we know Supermicro, we knew all the companies that are kind of right there right now, Taiwan Semi. But Then you have the secondary plays. And you're going to start seeing this might be a secondary, tertiary play. It might take a few months or a couple of years, but eventually it's going to be something that's all over the headlines. And when it is, by the time it's the headlines, we all know these stocks already moved. So that's why I'm looking at them now as potential buys. And they're not very risky, a lot of them. It's not a huge risk. You're not taking, a lot of them make decent money and you buy a basket, but you have a couple of those. If this trend moves, it can move for a couple of years and could be a nice way to diversify a portfolio.
Well, and I think kind of going back to what I said, and you've got a story in the notes on Cape Town. Unfortunately, I think to really get this trend started, something like that has to happen. Like if there is a situation like that in the U.S., all of a sudden the money's got to flow to these things. And other than I know I keep bringing up Flint, but other than that, it hasn't really been this, massive thing.
Yeah. So South Africa, or Cape Town in particular in South Africa, they had a severe drought. It was really for many years, but the 3 years from 2015 and 2018, and 2018, the city started talking about what they called quote unquote day zero. That would be the day that the city runs out of water. And due to the drought, they've come back from it a little bit since then, but they're still similar to California, a lot of other places. California until the last 18 months, they were in a century-long drought, not a super drought, but a century-long drought. That's insane. Lake Mead, you probably saw the pictures, 18 months ago of Lake Mead. Cities that, little towns in these lakes that were you didn't even know were there. They were covered up, they covered in water, are coming up, seeing homes, and it was crazy. It has since we've had a lot of good weather as far as that's concerned, and out west it's gotten back to decent levels. But what if it didn't? I mean, what if it didn't? I hate to be the what if guy, but shit, if that does, that's where you get water from. You're fighting with Nevada. You're fighting because they take a lot of water from Nevada. Or fighting with Nevada. Vegas uses a lot of water. Obviously, we know that. So the Stockholm International Water Institute, which I never heard of, and it sounds very leftist to me. I don't know why I think that, but it sounds very leftist. But they listed the severe threats to humanity in the next decade. All 10 were related to water somehow. So again, I'm not taking it with a grain of salt, but I did look through the list. Some are ridiculous, but there are a lot that are, it is water related. Like you mentioned, conflicts, other things. It is water related.
Well, cool. Well, let's so a couple things. I'm gonna kind of let you go over them because we've got some ideas. I checked them out. I do like these. The one thing, I'm going to lean on Matt on this because I went digging. He sent me the agenda over the weekend, and unfortunately, there really isn't any, penny stocks, low price stocks, day tradable stocks that are capitalizing on us. Now the point is, I kind of wasn't surprised because we all know that these stocks, they capitalize on trends and they glom onto things. And that's why we see weed stocks that become crypto stocks, that become electric vehicle stocks. Okay. We've seen that. So I like all these ideas. Now, one thing I will say is that's what's cool about short-term trading is if this trend starts to heat up and come into play, you will see that. You will literally see some of these struggling small caps that say, hey, we're all of a sudden a desalination play. Hey, we're all of a sudden a water filtration play. And as crazy as it sounds, I'm doing this 18 years, those stocks that do that pivot, they become epic day trades because people pile into them because they believe the story. Now, we don't believe it, but they believe the story that they're going to be the next big one. They see it for $1 and they're like, oh, it's going to 100. So that creates opportunity. But as of right now, just not really any interesting small caps in this space. So
I know I did that too, and I was hoping to find some for us here too. And I went through the whole list, and there's just really not much out there, unfortunately. And I don't know why that is. But yeah, I try to see the exact thing. I'm like, there's got to be a couple, right? And I didn't have anything off the top of my head. There's got to be a couple. But I think you're right. There's probably companies out there that maybe is a secondary generator of revenue for them. They may have some ties to water treatment, piping, that type of stuff, that you may see them really focus on that more as this trend becomes big because they want to ride the coattails of all the big guys. So I think you're right. We will see it when the time is right, which I'm sure I'll be listening to you and your team to find out which ones they are. Because right now I don't know what they are. But I'm just going to throw a couple stocks out there. These are in no specific order or no buy or sell recommendations. But a couple that I've liked over the years and I have on my watch list. First one is a Xylem, which is XYL. I'm pretty sure I've owned this at some point in the past or recommended it at some point in the past. But this stock has had a hell of a run here since it went public. That around $20 in 2011. It's at 136 now. This company is known for a lot of these are testing and treatment stocks, infrastructure plays, and this does some piping and stuff as well. And we talked about all the water main breaks and the testing. So the testing to me and treatment are really two ways to play this, because that goes along with money that I hope will eventually be spent on infrastructure. So Xylem is one I'd keep an eye on.
And just from a charting perspective, I'm just looking at 1 year, 1 day, and I love these charts of stocks that, they break out, they go on a run, consolidate for a while, breaks out again, consolidates and breaks out. Because again, especially from like the shorter term, more like swing trade perspective, you like to see these repeating patterns, because basically once it breaks out of that range, that's your entry. And then that kind of sideways area, if it breaks that, idea is busted, you move on. But I just could look back to last fall, it did that. This spring, it did that. And basically right now, it's kind of doing the same thing, where since June, July, and August, it's just kind of, basing right below that breakout point. So once it breaks out, then you risk the consolidation area. So chart perspective, I really like it.
Yeah, this one you're going to like then too. It looks pretty similar. It says Ecolabs, which people probably heard of. Ecolab, ECL. Same thing, broke above this year, above the late 2021 high, consolidating, right? Broke above it, consolidating. This one, this is pretty interesting. It does some wastewater, but it's more in that kind of smart water use, they call it. So they have like a cloud-based water technology that they do. According to Ecolabs, last year they conserved 220 billion gallons of water, aiming for 300 billion by the end of the decade. So I like this type of play, because before we get to the technology where it could just reuse water, like you said, and easily get it back out there, conserving it's really important now. And we have such great AI, cloud-based monitors and sensors in the world that we can conserve a little bit more and not have these wastes where it seeps into the ground from these really bad pipes, etc. So this company I like based off that. I think they're in the right direction here.
Yeah, again, chart perspective, story, love it. Yep.
Just two more I'll throw out here real quick. Tetra Tech, TTEK. Again, these charts are great. Looking at it, and this thing, this broke above early this year. Its old high around 190, up to 235. You look at this chart on last 12 months, Tim. It's a classic uptrend. Higher highs, higher lows. It looks great. So that's one. And then I have a bunch more, but I'm just going to share one more. Badger meter, which is BMI. It's what it sounds like, smart meters. Again, meters help. It's not going to solve the water problem 100%. If you bought this 11 years ago, you're up 10x.
Yep.
And people say, you can't 10x. And people say, oh, it's 11 years. Well, name me some other investments in your portfolio that you're up 1,000% in the last 11 years.
Yep.
I bet you don't have that many. And again, this sounds boring as hell, meters for water, yet this shows the need for them. We may have been wrong, Tim, in our minds 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but these stocks tell me a different story. Now that I look at it, we weren't wrong.
Yep.
These stocks have done really damn well and outperformed the market. So I think we were right. I'm going to go back and say we were right.
Yeah, and that's another thing that again, I mostly work with day traders, talk with day traders, but I've got that kind of different approach where I look for these opportunities. And again, people want to poo-poo them, but it's like, listen, especially now, again, if you're just getting started day trading and you can't diversify, but for all of you out there that can, again, I'm sure your 401k isn't up 10x in the last decade,
Exactly. So, yeah, I think when we talk about water, oh, we have so much of it. Oh, I have 4 bottles in front of me. I paid probably $20 for. Who the hell cares? But hopefully we can get through, because I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, there's some great investment opportunities long-term for this. Not yet day trading, but I think there will be at some point, like you said, but there's great opportunities. And it's a trend you can't ignore. You're going to hear a lot more about it. So you might as well learn about it now from us.
Well, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the topic. When basically Matt and I just kind of spitball issues. And when I saw this, I was like, yeah, love it. So again, guys, let us know, this today was really kind of big picture, looking at future trends, maybe some kind of slower moving ideas. But that's like what we want to do with the podcast is this isn't some 30-second YouTube short that says, hey, here's a stock or whatever. The idea is by having the podcast, we can kind of keep you ahead of trends. And then when these things start heating up, you already know about them. You're prepared. Maybe you got some trade ideas, et cetera. And then you're not, like that classic idea of you find out about it 6 months later and the trend is already taken off. So that's what we kind of try and do with these ideas. And that's why I really like this one. So thanks again, my man.
Awesome. So, yeah, my pleasure.
That being said, everyone, thanks for joining us on the SteadyTrade Podcast. As always, I think we got a mailbag episode coming up soon. Drop those questions, drop those comments, and we'll definitely cover them. We'll probably do mailbags every now and then, but I'll always, any question that kind of comes up through the episode, just hit it in the comments and we'll answer those, every now and then, and kind of, that way you guys stay up to speed as much as possible. So thanks again, Matt, and thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode of the SteadyTrade Podcast.